Hi, welcome to Tales of Dread. Tonight we have some encounters with reptilians for you. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Enjoy these cryptid encounters, but beware of what lurks beneath. I live in the Carolinas, where there are a lot of swamps. They can't be avoided. But if you grew up in this area, you know the rules. Don't go near them without bug spray, and be careful of snakes and alligators. But what if I told you that I once saw something down there that made me think I should instead take 100 mosey bites? Let me tell you about it. So, I was driving home from work one night when I noticed the car started to pull. I realized I had a flat tire, so I pulled over and made sure one of the front wheels was flapping. I work in a bar, and sometimes the customers get a little rowdy. I think there was a fight outside, and some broken glass wasn't picked up, so I had to drive over it. Now I know that you should always have a spare. It was one of the million or so things on my list that I hadn't done yet. So now I'm stuck on the side of the road near the swamps, because I couldn't have broken down in town with all the street lights and people. So I'm trying to decide whether to call for help from AAA or a friend. And that's right. When I hear this strange sound, I'm near a swamp at night, where all kinds of animals live and go about their business, making all kinds of sounds. But this sounded different. At first, I thought someone was just passing by, or that someone had seen my car and stopped further down the road, which I had missed, and was now coming to help because it sounded like wet footsteps, like someone had been walking through water. I looked both ways down the street, but to my surprise, I couldn't see who or what was making the noise. This was because I was obviously looking at the road. When I turned around and looked back at the swamp, I saw who or what was making the noise. It looked like a lizard, but not like a normal lizard, which would have been too normal. Don't worry, though, because this lizard looked like a person. I just stood there with my mouth open, pinching myself and rubbing my eyes to see if I was really dreaming. I couldn't help but stay awake and stare at what I can only describe as a lizard man until I got home and tried to find out more about him. He kind of reminded me of an alligator, which is the best way I can describe him. With two legs like humans, but a much thinner body and long legs. It's kind of hard for me to say exactly what it is. I guess because my mind really wants to try to figure out what my eyes are telling it. Yes, he looked really tall, like a normal person. His skin was thick and scaly, and his arms and legs looked very strong. His head looked like that of a real lizard or alligator. It had long jaws with big teeth, a snout, and eyes that stuck out on the sides. He was just slowly waiting for the water in the swamp to come right at me. I'm going to take a chance and say that lizard people don't learn how to fix things in a shop. So, the only thing I can think is that this was going to hurt me. So I grabbed my phone and keys and ran as far away from the swamp and my car as I could until I reached some houses and street lights about a mile down the road. Then I called a friend and asked them to come get me. He is either a lot braver or a lot dumber now. Then he takes a big pickup truck and drives back. When I told him what I had seen, he wanted to check it out right away. The shotgun he had in the back made me feel braver. But there was still a chance. We went back to my car, which was still right where I had left it. So it looks like this lizard guy wasn't interested in stealing my car. My friend Nate jumps out of the pickup, shotgun in hand, and starts shouting and hollering, but of course we don't see anything. I don't know what that thing was or what it was supposed to do. I didn't know much except that I didn't want to wait around and find out. But, as I said before, I was feeling more confident. I looked, and I not only found your channel, but I also found a lot of other disturbing videos that were like yours. So it looks like lizard men or alligator men are everywhere, and based on what you've seen before, it looks like there's a whole family of them living in the swamps here in southeastern America. You should really pay attention to some of what your mom tells you. We always thought we knew best when we were kids, but listen. There is often a reason why they tell you not to do certain things, but we usually end up finding them out the hard way. For example, my mother told us kids not to play in the stream at the bottom of the field because it was dirty and muddy and you never knew what you might find or catch in there. It was like telling us kids not to eat candy because it would make our teeth fall out. After we were warned, we were even more drawn to the stream. So, after a rainy night, my little brother and I went straight to the stream the next morning, knowing it would be full. So, it sounds even better. We looked for newts with sticks, made paper boats, and did all the other things that any child would do near a stream. We took off our shoes and stomped in the muddy water. That's when we saw ripples in the air, which told us there was something living there besides just water and flies, which was all we had seen so far. We were happy about this. Now I don't know what to expect in the muddy, mucky stream, but whatever came out of the water would blow our tiny, 8-10-year-old minds. He, or they must have been lying low on the ground under the stream when it stood up and rose from the water. There was no way he could have been under that much water, or else it would have been about our height. So, it was about 4 feet long and had green scales, with fins, and gills. It looked like something out of a comic book. He was short and had long, bent legs, thin arms, and hands and feet with webbing. I'm not trying to be mean. It looked like an amphibian, and it was both funny and scary. This little creature came out of the stream, but he wasn't so little to us at the time because he was about our size. My brother and I were scared and excited at the same time. We had our mouths wide open. It's not exactly what you'd think you'd see. I wish I could say we weren't scared, but we both were. We weren't ready for something like that to happen. He mostly just looked at us with a bored expression, then turned around and ran away. We ran all the way home and didn't stop until we were back in the kitchen with my mom, who just looked at us as if to say, "See, I told you not to go into the stream." It's like she knew deep down that we shouldn't have been there and that there might have been more danger than we thought. Of course, This happened a long time ago. But as an adult, it's fun to think back on those days and realize that there are animals that aren't like what we imagined. I don't believe in Bigfoot, but what my brother and I saw could have been caused by an animal species that hasn't been found yet. I don't know what kind of animal that was. People have asked me if you ever get used to living where alligators live, but I'm not sure what to say. It's like asking if you ever get used to living near a hornet's nest. Sure, you'll get used to the sights and sounds. But if you get stung, you get stung, and it doesn't matter how often you see him, it still hurts. So it is with gators, they eat you and you die, no matter how often you sing their songs. I've lived in gator country for 45 years, and I still have all my limbs. I do think that some close calls have made me less brave, and one in particular stands out. I'm not sure if I can really put it on the alligators. I had just enough southern comfort to make me braver than I should have been, and when I'm brave, I like to go exploring. I want to take the canoe, the lantern if I need it, and go looking around. Even when it's trying to look like a drifting log, I know what an alligator looks like, and no amount of alcohol can make me miss it. It's a sight that I know by heart, but I came across something entirely new really. It's a miracle that it didn't kill me, since I went in fully expecting to die. So I'm out there exploring because I'm curious and I want to feel good. I could row down those paths. We're getting smaller and smaller, and the reasons for this are becoming more and more similar. I went to a water cleanup. I swear I saw what looked like tall green pineapples growing up out of the water. They had the same shape and texture, but the outside looked like scales and a lot of things would move and wiggle every once in a while. There was also the occasional burp, which could have been air or fluid coming out. If I'd been smart or sober, I would have run back home as fast as I could. But I wasn't as sober as a big kid who just found out about big pine cones. I had to see what sort of secrets those big scaly green things held. They were almost impossible to cut with my knife. I could easily get the blade under a scale and pull it off. That was it, though. The things were well armored. I could figure out that it was some kind of egg or embryo, but I didn't think long enough about what made them, and the weather told me that there would be things nearby to protect the brood. At first, I thought it was a gator getting ready to attack me. Then I thought the whiskey might have been mixed with something stronger than just alcohol, because I saw what could have been a gator walking on its two back legs, keeping its balance just fine and holding its body up with the grace of a cobra. The head, on the other hand, was shorter and the eyes were bigger than usual. The mouth was also a little bit open, and all the teeth you'd expect to see were there. However, the eyes were alert and smart in a way I've never seen in a gator before. It must have been Mama, and she wasn't happy to see me. I pulled out my dad's empty revolver and pointed it at my attacker. And she or it seemed to know right away, because they stopped moving. I ran away from the water where I had just dropped my phone. After that, the last thing I remember is someone calling my name from far away. I lost my mind. When I didn't come home at night, my wife had gone back to look for me. They were pretty close to me when I was wrestling with my little scaly friend. I don't see any other reason why I should still be here. If it had just been me and her, I'm sure that thing that lived in the swamp would have eaten me to death. I have never seen an alligator like that before. I also don't know what it was. I don't know why I even said the word alligator. Even though it looked like an alligator, many of its features were very human. So, I don't know if he was or wasn't an alligator man. And its eggs or embryos, which I found. Either way, I'm very upset, and I hope this news will make you feel better than it makes me feel. I went to the Amazon rainforest as part of a research trip. We were looking for signs that some plants might be able to treat modern illnesses. The fact that the world's healthcare system needs all the help it can get is another big secret. The locals led us to a thick grove of trees that grew these strange, small yellow fruits that were not lemons. When this fruit was taken back to a lab for research, it was found that substances and proteins in it killed cancer cells in their early stages right away. Just so you know, my bosses were eager to get their hands on not only these fruits but also the seeds of this tree so they could start thinking about how to grow them in a controlled environment as soon as possible. The natives told them that they shouldn't let too much of their fruit leave the grove at once. If not, the forest would get mad. We thought you were joking. Well, I hoped that the forest wouldn't think that 3 small crates was too much. I was putting the last nail in the crate's lid when we all heard a blood-chilling howl. Staring at us from between the trees were large compound eyes that mostly changed from green to yellow. Most of the faces were olive green, but some were a mix of grey and brown. At first, I thought they were people who had a lot of war paint on them. Does that make sense? We might have stepped on the land of an undiscovered tribe in the Amazon, but then I saw that they weren't even people. I saw scales that looked like meat hooks and teeth that looked like shark teeth. Faces that ranged from those that looked like Komodo dragons to those that looked like modern crocodiles. I don't think I've ever ran so fast in my life. My veins were on fire and my heart felt like it would have stopped at any minute. After a very long time I looked behind me to see that the creatures were not pursuing me. I had tried to get back to that grove, but I could never find my way back. People thought that the expedition was a big failure. And before we could leave the country, the Brazilian military met us and took our 3 crates. They also took the leader of the expedition and almost locked him up before giving him a good talk. We were told to leave the country as soon as possible and never come back. I'm not sure why the Brazilian military had to get involved or why they thought they had to take the fruit away, threaten us, and tell us to leave. There's something going on. I think they knew there was something wrong with that grove, and the warnings we got before about that same grove were probably meant to keep us from going there. What do you know? We were not supposed to see that we had seen. I went on a long fishing trip to a more remote part of Alaska. Of course, every part of Alaska is remote. There are a lot of places in Alaska that you can only get to by plane. Even for Alaskans, I was miles away from anyone else. It was just me and waters and tall grasses and pines and blue skies. At least, I thought that was the case. I was spending the night staring at the moon. Something about it is hypnotic and keeps you interested. Then I'd turn on the water. I would then see disturbances in the water at the time. I just thought this was because of the fish, which made me look forward to the day's catches. But there were some things about the disturbance in the water that they couldn't explain. For example, there were things sticking out of the water that I knew didn't belong to any fish, and trust me, if anyone knew fish, it was me. I woke up in the middle of the night because I had a gut feeling I was in trouble. I couldn't tell you why, though. I got out of my tent on purpose and looked around. I didn't see any wolves or coyotes or bears, but when I looked towards the water I saw some hunchback shape with a long tail. I can make out the silhouette of long claws, a spiked dorsal plate that ran up and down the back all the way to the tip of the tail. At first, I thought this was a real dinosaur hunting at night, which would make sense since dinosaurs were nocturnal. The way the water moved was very strange. Then I realized I was seeing more than one of the same kind of animal. Perhaps dozens. Every time I could almost see their heads, they were pacing at the edge of the water. They were looking at me. I felt sick to my stomach when I saw that I was surrounded by miles and miles of empty, wild land. I could run for hours without seeing anybody. I was out there by myself with these things that knew I was there, so it's safe to say I didn't get much sleep for the rest of that trip. Some of those nights, I didn't sleep at all, and when I did, it was because I was so tired. I don't know why those dinosaur things never tried to get my attention. Maybe they were just keeping an eye on something and making sure this person didn't go any farther. In any case, I still see those shapes following me around like sharks when I'm sleeping, but that's probably just my fear and trauma from what happened. Even today, I really think I saw dinosaurs in the flesh. I was driving home one afternoon through some thick farmland. I looked at the open fields and thought to myself how lucky I was to have a steady job in town and then go home to my house in the country. It was a beautiful spring day with almost full sun and trees that were starting to look green and healthy again. I was just looking around and taking in the sights when I saw something run out in front of me onto the road. I've never gone too fast because of this. On the winding roads, because you never know what could jump out of the bushes. I have almost hit a deer before, and I still don't know which of us was more startled. This thing was far enough in front of me that I could carefully hit the brakes and slow down without causing any problems because there were no other cars around. Also, this gave me a chance to see what kind of creature this jaywalker was. I know it was some kind of lizard-like reptile. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't have believed it was there. Because of the greenish scales on its body, you could tell where something like that came from or was going. I didn't know there was water around here. There aren't any huge lakes or swamps, but there is water. Still, it was a kind of reptile I had never seen before crossing the road. You can see that most of its relatives. It wasn't moving like a gecko, slithering across the road or running on four legs. No, this thing was walking across the road like a person on 2 feet. It looked like it had small, webbed feet, a long, scaled body, and even small arms. It almost looked like a lizard or an alligator had just decided that 2 feet was the way to go. Its body didn't look right. Not that what I was seeing was even the slightest bit normal. It looked more like a human torso, except that it was covered in green scales and had the legs of a reptile. The head came next. Have you ever seen the thing from the Black Lagoon? That strange-looking head with what looked like flat gills on the side. Well, that's what it looked like on top of this long, messed up human lizard. It also wasn't that tall. At most, maybe 3 feet. When it saw the car, it turned and looked at me for a moment with wide, unblinking eyes. Then it took off faster than I could have ever imagined. I just sat there with my car running and wondered what the heck I had just seen. It didn't look scary, and I wasn't really scared, but I was surprised. After a few moments, when it looked like I wouldn't have to go back, I just kept going home. But I'll never forget exactly what I saw that night. I was on my way home from a work conference a few years ago, when I started to feel very tired. I know myself well enough to know that I needed a break and to try to get some sleep before I fell asleep at the wheel. So I stopped on the side of the road and closed my eyes. I must have needed it, because the next thing I knew, I woke up with a start and looked at my phone. I had been outside for almost 3 hours, and now the sun was just starting to come up. Now that it was getting lighter, I could see that I had parked near a lake or reservoir. Maybe I got out of the car for just a minute or two to stretch because I couldn't feel my legs and my neck hurt from not getting enough sleep. As I got out of the car, I saw that there were footprints in it. It wasn't hard to see that the paint is white and the prints are dirty, but there was something odd about them. They were far enough apart to look like whatever had walked straight over. My car was standing on 2 legs, but what was even stranger was that it had webbed feet for a moment. I thought it might be a goose because they have 2 legs and webbed feet, but when I looked closer, even though I'm not an expert on the size of bird feet, I realized that it wasn't a goose. These prints look much bigger, like a man-sized creature with webbed feet crossed over my car. The tracks also led to the water, so whatever had been on top of the car had pretty much gone straight into the water. I could also see that where the footprints started, there was a big puddle on the side of the road. I looked out into the water for a long time, trying to figure out what was going on. But no matter what I tried, I couldn't figure out why there was a lizard footprint the size of a man on my car that went straight into the water. So I spent some time listening to YouTube channels and found yours. And you seem to know a lot about this specific topic. Could you please give me some good advice? Dogs can be both good and bad. They're great when they come over and wag their tails lovingly, and they're fun to have around when you need a reason to get up and go for a walk. When they have to go out at 10 p.m., they are not so great. When it's cold, dark, and raining, especially if they have to go to the bathroom and have been taught not to do their business in the yard. Because of this, on a cold, wet, dark night, I was in the woods behind my house yelling at my dog, who was taking so long to find a good place to sleep that I thought he was having trouble going. I stood there stomping my feet and blowing on my hands, trying to stay warm and not notice that it was raining on the back of my jacket. When I heard rustling in the trees, it wasn't on the side where the dog was. Since we were in the wrong place, I wasn't too worried. The animals that come out at night were ready to play, and the last thing they needed was to see a person and a big dog that couldn't decide where to squat. There was a sound like a wet hiss. I know that sounds like an odd way to describe it, but it was kind of like when you go swimming and swallow too much water. There was more rustling and shaking of leaves, and I yelled at the dog to hurry up or I would leave him there alone all night. Not that he understood or cared, but that's what we do. More rustling, and for the first time I noticed that the rustling wasn't coming from the ground but was coming from the same height as me in the trees. I thought it was strange. It could have been a squirrel, but since it was much higher up and then walked out, my first thought was that it was a kid dressed up. It was too late to be alone in the woods, and Halloween wasn't for a long time. As I stood there staring at it, I started to think that if it was costume makeup, it was Hollywood-level special effects from its feet to its head. It had what looked like brown, scaly skin to me because the light was bad. It was just a little bit taller than me and skinny as a rake, with long, dangling arms and long legs like a supermodel. I didn't know if it was male or female because its torso was flat and I couldn't see any parts that would tell me. What about the head? It was long and flat, not round or oval like a person, but squat like a real snake, with bigger eyes that didn't close. The dog also noticed. It made a noise and then whimpered as it ran over to me. That scared the snake enough that it kind of slithered away. I have no idea how it could have moved. It had long legs, but the way it moved made me think of that. The dog started barking like crazy and ran after this thing. I was able to grab him and drag him back to the house. When we went inside, he was right behind me. For a while, he drank, begged, and acted crazy. I can't take him into those woods at night anymore. I couldn't have thought that the dog also saw it. So, you must have seen something out there that we can't explain. I'm pretty sure I know what's under that. I'm not hallucinating. What do you think about my meeting? I saw something back in the early 1970s that I will never fully understand and will never forget. Even though I was only a teenager at the time, I can still see him growing up on the Jersey Shore. We spent a lot of time on the beaches and in the water. Occasionally, a shark would be spotted, and the beaches would be closed, but it never lasted long. And there were definitely no real attacks on the part of the beach we went to. Of course, that didn't mean the sharks weren't out there or that they weren't killing other things in the ocean. And sometimes, after school, when we got out, we'd run down to the beach and find sharkies' half-eaten snacks that had washed up on the shore. We were teenagers, so we were more creeped out by it than grossed out. Usually, it was more about finding the grossest thing we could. And I'm pretty sure that the time I almost lost my lunch was when an octopus washed up with all of its tentacles half bitten off. And I still don't know for sure what it was. At the end of summer, it was getting dark. Now, you may have a picture in your head of the boardwalk and other places in Jersey that are full of tourists, and I'm sorry if I gave you the wrong idea about this area. I'm talking about the place where we used to hang out. It wasn't really private, but it was a bit out of the way. So, only people who lived nearby went there, which was fine with us because it was often just us. It was late summer, late evening, but not yet night. Even though it was getting dark, we could still see fine. What we saw, too. I'm going to say it right away. We saw a gator man, or, as I called it later, a humanoid alligator because we weren't the only ones to see it. I felt very thankful. I had some friends with me at the time, not only because it scared the crap out of me, but also so I could prove I wasn't lying or hallucinating or something. It was the 1970s, after all. So I'm pretty sure that a lot of people were still taking acid or smoking weed, but just to be clear. We weren't drunk, we were all sober and had been hell. My dad was a police officer. He'd have beaten me black and blue if I ever did a drug. So, there were 4 of us, and we were all totally sober when we saw this gator man. I think the best way to describe him is that he looked like a really tall alligator instead of one with short, skinny legs. So it looks like they're going around on their stomachs. It had arms and legs the size and length of a person, but it was still covered in scales and had claws and a gator head with a long snout and big teeth. It popped up in the ocean out of nowhere, but it was close enough for us to see it. I think the water came up to where it would have needed to be. I don't know what it did or where it went because we ran out of there as fast as we could and didn't look back. A lot of people saw him that summer, so we knew it wasn't a dream, but then he disappeared. Who he was. He was there and why. I can't find out. But I'll never forget him. When I was in college, my roommate and I drove back to Ohio, where she lived, for Thanksgiving. At the very least, it was a long drive. But the promise of home-cooked meals and free laundry for a week made the trip more than worth it. My roommate was a lot of fun and came from a big family. Over the next few days, I would meet most of his relatives. So, the trip went by pretty quickly because she happily told me stories about Uncle Lenny and her cousin Susie. We made sure to stop for breaks and even ate lunch at a mom-and-pop diner on the side of the road. We sent her mom a text message whenever we had service or bars to let her know how things were going. Everything was going well. Then we came to a stretch of highway that looked like it hadn't been used in decades. It was like a scene from a movie about a serial killer, and we laughed and joked about finding a broken-down car on the side of the road with a guy like Ted Bundy waiting to hit us over the head with a club. Obviously, that didn't happen, since I'm running into you to tell you the story. Also, you talk about crypto monsters and not people. We did see something on the side of the road while we were laughing and planning how to escape and become the last girls, but it was Bundy or BTK. At first, it was clear that this thing was much smaller than a person. As we got closer, we thought it was some kind of dog at first. I don't know why, to be honest, because I could tell it was greenish even as we were getting close to it. And dogs don't usually have that kind of color. It also looks like it's standing up, because we could see legs, even though we are still pretty far away. We seem to be getting close to something small, maybe 4 feet tall, standing on 2 legs, and green. I remember that very well because we were right next to it as we drove by and I could see it out the passenger window. We didn't say anything. After that, neither of us said a word for about 5 to 10 minutes. My roommate didn't go any slower, but she didn't go any faster either. We just kept rolling. Lastly, I remember putting my hands on my lap and looking straight ahead through the windshield, not at my friend. I just asked, "Did you just see that really tall frog standing up like a person?" She then laughed what seemed like a relieved laugh and said, "Yes." We both laughed nervously for a while, and to be honest, I'm not sure either of us fully understood what we had just driven past. I mean, it's not something you see all the time. Mr. Toad from Wind in the Willows was standing by the road. He wasn't wearing clothes, of course. That would be crazy, but he was about the size of a child, and he was standing up on 2 bent legs, not hunched over ready to jump on all 4s. like a regular frog. I honestly thought that maybe the coffee at the diner had been poisoned or drugged, because it just couldn't be real. But if we were, we didn't show any other symptoms or signs. So what the heck did we see? Is it true that there is a type of tall, two-legged frog that lives in Ohio? Was he trying to hitchhike? We can't find out. But we still think a lot about that frogman and wonder what he's doing now. I mean, there was probably a pretty big swamp or marsh nearby, right? We try to make jokes about it no matter what. But the fact that we both saw the same thing is still weird. I work in the mail room of a very large company. The work is hard and takes a long time. But the pay is good and the people I'm with are even better, so we don't go crazy. We tell each other stories all the time. Since we're all over 18, even though the business is worth millions, we often try to scare each other. The mail room is still a bit dated, and even though our work area is fine, and the break room and bathrooms are clean, there are still a few old, dark, and dirty storage areas down there. I like to think of myself as a master storyteller, and I had been memorizing as many long creepypastas as I could find to keep the title of King of Creepy going. These included urban legends, bad remakes, and sequels to movies that no one had ever seen. So they didn't know what happened in the story. It was great. As soon as I started my shift, people kept asking me to tell them more scary stories. So, what happened to me in one of those dark, damp, and dirty storerooms was, in a way, typical. As far as I know, nobody believed me. They all thought it was just another one of my stories or that I was playing a joke on them, but I wasn't. As I've already said, the warehouse part where we spent most of our time and the parts of the building we used for breaks was fine and had been fitted out with damp proofing, air conditioning, and heaters in the winter and summer. However, the oldest part of the building, which was hidden away down various old corridors, was where you only went once in a blue moon if you were. And it just so happened that the plug for the microwave had blown a fuse, so me being me, I volunteered to go down to one of the rooms that was set aside for random storage because I was sure I had seen a box of batteries and other things down there. Since about a week ago, it hadn't stopped raining, and it smelled even more damp than usual. The deeper I went, the more I could see that there was electricity and light, but no heat. So it always smelled kind of rusty and a thick must. Even the walls sometimes felt damp. I thought I could hear a sort of snuffling sound as I got closer to the room. I'm sure you've figured out by now that I'm not easy to scare, but I still didn't want to meet a rat because they carry all kinds of nasty diseases. So, even though I wasn't scared, I was ready for anything. I was wearing my favorite work boots, and I was a good kicker, especially when I played football in school. As I got closer to the door of the storeroom, the noise got louder. It sounded almost wet, like something was swallowing. It's hard to say what it is. I threw open the door with my leg out in front of me, ready to kick or stomp on something. I'm not sure. I just had the feeling that I should be ready for something. I pulled on the lights cord, and as soon as the room got bright, I saw it. That's about the best way I can describe what I saw. It was big, but not as big as me. I'm only 64, so not many people are that old. I thought it was easily over 5 feet tall. Whatever it was standing on 2 legs, just like you and me. It had very tiny arms that had held in front of itself not long, except it was at the side. It was very dark, green, grainy looking, and scaly. I can 100% say that it looked lizard-like because it had a very lizard head and face. It had a long mouth like a lizard's and even a tail that looked like one. On either side of its huge face are 2 big yellow eyes that are bulging out. It was weird looking, but not necessarily scary. This thing stood about 15 feet away from me. It was about the size of a small man and had 2 feet. I was sure I was looking at an alien, maybe a lizard-like alien. It looked at me, and I looked back at him, her, or it. It could be either a man or a woman. I'm saying him. I don't know what the hell it was. I slowly backed out of the door and slammed it. I ran back to the mail room and told the others what I had seen. I got a burst of laughter, so I patted him on the back and gave him a high five. A couple of them said they believed me and went back down to the room to see for themselves, but nothing was there. So it turned out to be a great joke. Just another great story. I know how it got there because I saw it happen. I have no idea. I know that on the other side of that storage room, there are old windows that a big person could easily fit through. But those haven't been messed with them a long time. And there are thick forest in woods surrounding the outside of this unit. Who knows? Do I really think that this thing got in through the window and was waiting in that room for the right time? Actually, no. But I can't think of another reason why this thing was there. My grandfather was a sailor, and he used to tell us about all the strange things he saw at sea. In fact, he would often tell us stories with a twinkle in his eye and a hint of a smile, like how he met the pirate Blackbeard or found an underwater city of gold. But there was one story that he told over and over again, and no matter how many times he told it, I never saw that twinkle. It makes me think of the things he made up to make us laugh. This story was true to what I thought at the time, which was that it happened somewhere near the Caribbean. Before anyone makes assumptions. At least 20 years have passed since my grandfather died. This story was told to me when I was about 10, so it happened when he was younger than I am now. So he didn't get his idea from or base his story on a famous movie with Jack Sparrow. He and the other people on the ship had been there for about a week, and things were going well. They were well on track for whatever their end destination was, and in good spirits. Most of the men at the time were below deck doing what sailors do. At that point, there was a loud splash. A very large splash. Even though he was in the middle of the ocean, which is not at all strange, something told him to look over the side of the ship. At first, he couldn't see what kind of animal was making the noise, but he could see ripples in the water. He seemed to remember that it was around dusk, so the sun wasn't up very high and it wasn't completely dark yet. He also wasn't scared at all, he was just curious, as if it were playing a game with him. Even though he could see bubbles, the creature wouldn't come back up to the surface. So he knew something was down there. A lot of the sea creatures he had met were very curious. He had seen dolphins and even an octopus swim right up to the ship, as if to say, "What are you doing in my ocean?" He moved away from the side of the ship so he couldn't see the water because he knew these things could be fun. And sure enough, as soon as he moved back, he heard two loud splashes, a bang, and something hitting the ship's bottom. Still not thinking it was anything that would be a potential threat, he raced back over to try and catch a glimpse, and he was rewarded by catching sight of the very end of a vibrant aqua-green tail. Then diving back under the water, he remembers thinking it was the most beautiful color and wondering what kind of fish the fin must belong to now. He was now very interested, but he wasn't scared. Slowly moving away, he made sure no one could see him. This time, he quietly crept to the edge of the ship so he could pop up quickly and see what was below. Maybe he discovered a new breed of fish. As I said, he was interested and now eager to find out what was hiding from him. He heard a bump and a splash, and as I've already said, he jumped up as fast as he could to look over the side. Whenever Grandad told us about meeting Long Dong Silver or surviving a battle with a kraken, we knew he was lying and making things up to make us laugh. He would get very animated when he told us stories, and he would often make us jump and then cover us with kisses. But I swear there was none of that when he told us this. If you can believe it, his face turned white and his voice shook a little. This is because when he looked over this time, he caught a quick glimpse of what was playing with him. It was a sea creature. Don't think for a second that this thing is related to Ariel. He said that its body looked like Nosferatu, with long hair, a twisted skeleton, and a fin. Can you even believe that nose? Atu's face is twisted and has huge fangs and wide open eyes. Instead of a bald head, it has long, tangled, wet hair that is thick with seaweed. Then, instead of a human body, there was a smelly, almost concave structure of bones with two shriveled, wrinkled chest bones and visible ribs. The only thing that showed for sure that it was from another world. The only thing about her that was like the Disney movie was her beautiful fin, which sparkled in the setting sun. Grandad said that once the creature saw that it had been seen, it went back under the water and never came back up. Of course they all knew the legends of sirens who were meant to be beautiful enchantresses who lured sailors with their beauty and song and then usually killed them and ate them. If that was a siren, it would have taken a very strong or desperate man to fall for it. Whatever it was, it scared my dad and Grandad to death. After about a year, he never saw anything else like it again. He stopped sailing for good and swore that from then on he would always stay on land. My decision to never own a car is what led to the events that form the basis of this story. I don't have enough money to live completely off the grid, but I do everything I can to get away from being dependent. I only make enough money to pay for everything else. I try to do with the help of my own hands. The system wants to put these hands in chains. Your hands, as well. I think the reason I ran into this person in the first place was because I was determined to fight back. Bus fare is one of the things I can't live without money for. I will not have a car. So I need to take one of the buses that are always going all over Manhattan to get where I need to go. Not a terrible way to do things. It's better than being tied down by a payment and costs for repairs and upkeep. Oh my God, and insurance. So, if you take the bus as much as I do, you get to know the faces of the people you see and can tell who works in the morning, who has errands to run in the afternoon, and who works at night just because. I started taking different buses just to see how many people were on each one. I had to ride the bus a few times before I realized that there was always the same person with me, no matter which bus I was on. He looked like an old woman even though he was an old man. If you didn't look closely, he looked a little bit homeless, a little bit crazy, a little bit of everything. He was like a human kaleidoscope, with an oversized, crushed cowboy hat, a Hawaiian shirt that was usually unbuttoned, pink shorts, and sneakers. He always had different kinds of paper or plastic shopping bags on him. He never smiled and rarely looked anyone in the eyes. You'd think that someone who was so loud would stand out right away, but I can't explain how he always seemed to fit in. I mean, he was so weird, but he was just a regular guy. No matter which bus I took, a crazy thought would start to form in the back of my mind and wouldn't go away. I thought he might be following me. So the first few times I followed him, I was going to follow him back. I didn't think he knew who I was, but I've been around long enough to know. With persistence, the truth will come out. He would ride the bus for a few trips around the route as if it were a way to see the sights, but then he would get off at a stop, sit down, and wait for the next bus. Then he'd ride that one several times along its route. I don't think I ever saw him stop anywhere to go to the bathroom. He just kept going. My bladder and bowels always seemed to scream before his did. Things came to a head that day, and I finally gave up and decided that he was just a dumb old man who had nothing better to do with his golden years than ride the subway. How most people of the next generation surf the web. So, he got off at the downtown intersection, where all the roads met. He got off and waited for the next bus. Come on, I'm not joking. Within 10 minutes, a different bus showed up, and the same guy got off, waited, and got on. Either those buses went a long way in 10 minutes, or there was something else going on. I used acid when I was younger, and I started to wonder if my constant tendency to have flashbacks was the cause. But I started to think that there was always one of him on every bus at any given time, The more I followed him, the more I noticed how often the buses would trade him at the intersection. That was the only thing that made sense. I started doing crazy things and working longer hours to make more money so I could buy those cheap little micro cams. I could get videos from different buses these days. I know that sounds crazy, but the way we're kept asleep and unaware of all of this is even crazier. Realizing this was just one way I was waking up. He really was everywhere. There was no one else everywhere. Just him? He never met himself. He moved in such a way that no two of him could ever be seen in the same place at the same time. I couldn't figure out why he did this until it came to me. While I was moving one of my cameras, someone was using them as eyes and ears. It would be too obvious if the bus driver gave it to someone who is so normal and quiet that no one looks at them twice. At that moment, I felt awake. I felt in charge. I had all the footage I needed to make my case and put it together like a documentary. All I needed was something that would make me fight. Real footage of me calling him out without giving him a chance to prepare. I made my move when he was alone at the downtown junction very early in the morning. I came on strong, as if I knew more than I was saying. His eyes moved back and forth over me like a machine. I heard a hissing sound that was the same time as his breathing. He looked into me, but then he looked into my eyes. I felt like he was in my space, like he could see me without clothes on. My vision got blurry, and he was the only thing I could see. Then his lips moved and made a series of sounds that I couldn't translate into words. Green scales started to appear on his skin, as if they had been pulled back into his pores or something. He even stuck out a long tongue between his lips and waggled it at me, and he made the first facial expression I had ever seen on him, a sinister grin that showed many sharp, pointed teeth. Then I felt like a sledgehammer had hit me in the face. I woke up in the shade of a small tree near the downtown junction. I wasn't sure how long I'd been out, but it felt like it was late. There was nothing I was missing. I had one of the cams in the breast pocket of my hoodie when he turned snake-like in front of me. I thought I was going to get a big one in the name of being woke, but when I got my cams and stuff home, they were all white. Every video I've ever taken has just shown white noise. Not only that, but all of his copies went away, and I never saw him or anyone else like him again. And I've heard that snake people are at the top of business and government, but when I thought about what they would want by bringing their game all the way to the bottom, I got a serious chill. Watching over regular people like me who come and go like trash in the wind. Do they keep that close an eye on all of us? And what kind of voodoo did you use to knock me out? Turn off my lights. Maybe that's how they do their jobs, or maybe that's how they hide in broad daylight. They don't simply fit in. They were doing some kind of voodoo magic. I don't know, but it seems like some kind of magical power is at work. If you keep seeing the same person on public transportation, they could be part of a sleeper cell that is just waiting, listening, and watching. I remember that when I was in 5th grade, we had a sub who stayed much longer than any sub should have. She was big and loud, and the only part of her that wasn't ridiculously big was her feet. They were like freak of nature feet with thin roots for her to walk on. We kept asking her when Mrs. Wimmer would be back, but all she would say was soon. We lost track of how long Mrs. Wimmer had been gone. It must have been a long time. One day, she told us that we were going to watch a movie that was so good that we would only take breaks for lunch and recess. I didn't know what kind of movie would last that long. I had to go to the bathroom right before she turned on the movie. I should have asked, but it hurt so much that I couldn't take a chance on a no. When I got back to class, the TV was already on Iraq, and the screen was filled with white noise. Those of you who are old enough to remember those days will know what I mean. No, that meant that the video would start soon, but it never did. I looked and waited patiently for the first few inches of black film to be read. It never did. Everyone in the classroom laughed out loud while I was waiting. It stopped. It was like watching something funny on TV. It happened once more. I was confused as I looked into the noise. There was no sound or anything else. It was one of the screens with a round shape. This is how the old things in a corner looked. I saw the lamp's reflection on the teacher's desk. It lit up the teacher's face, and the reflection was all messed up. Once I figured it out, it made me take a deep breath. Something that looked just like a crocodile and had scales was sitting at that desk. I turned around to see the very human teacher sitting behind the desk, but she was looking right at me, and the eyes I saw then were the same eyes I saw in the corner of the TV screen. Everyone around me laughed more, and the teacher smiled in a very evil, sinister way. I pretended to be sick for as long as I could, but eventually my act fell apart. After a few weeks, there was no classroom to go back to, and one of my classmates did some very violent things. He said that he knew it was the right thing to do because his teacher had shown him lessons and videos about it. As far as I know, no one ever heard of that substitute teacher. I've used Google, the white pages, and everything else I could find to learn as little as I could about her. It's like trying to find a ghost or chameleon that changes colors and blends into the background. No matter what, seeing that crocodile-like person scared me, and I don't know if she was from this planet, another planet, or hell itself. I only know that it, if that's what it was, hid itself as a person because its goals were different from those of the person. Hello. What's under the surface? I am always a lifeguard at Miami, Florida's Harriet Beach. I'm running into you to talk about and tell you about a recent event that happened at one of the beach resorts a few years ago. This event has completely destroyed the tourism industry and caused no one to come to this very small area. now. If you don't live there, you probably didn't hear much about it. But it happened quickly and was cleaned up quickly. Since I was 18, I worked there as a lifeguard for about 10 years. I liked my job, the ocean, the people, and even living like a beach bum. I really liked it. But I started to feel like this beach and resort were turning into a horror movie every day. Strange things, very strange and disturbing things, have been going on. And I still think the FBI looked into the strange things that happened to me and the rest of the staff in a big way. In this investigation, there were important people who were always being asked questions. If you're looking at this, well, you need to get rid of the idea that Florida is a place to relax, have fun, and take it easy. And instead, think of a place where you feel unsafe, uneasy, and like something terrible is about to happen. Jaws is better than this. I don't know how much cleaning and fixing has been done since the COVID problem. But this is how it was when I was there. The first thing to happen was in January. I was surfing on my surfboard, which is what we do when it's quiet. Since it was around 6 in the morning, there were only a few joggers on the beach. I was wearing my swimming trunks and my seafoam green surfboard was tied to my ankle with a long leather leash, as a lot of surfers do. The currents were a little wild, and I remember feeling a little uneasy because it seemed like the waves were moving in all different directions. They were usually very peaceful and calm. I saw a big wave coming at this time in the morning, and I couldn't wait to ride it. This is how I lived. It was an epic wave. I felt free and at one with the ocean. As I jumped up on my surfboard, I looked all the way to my Pinewood Beach hut, where I would use my own binoculars to watch the sunset as I rode that wave. When I could feel the electric adrenaline, it sent jolts of excitement right to my head and up my spine. My eyes went down to my feet when I thought I saw something that looked like blood coming out of my ankle. I stopped my surfboard gently and sat on it with my feet up so I could get a better look. My ankle was badly hurt, and blood was pouring out in a steady stream. Big bursts of red were making the blue sky look different. Okay, maybe not that dramatic, but you get the point. It was the strangest thing, because I didn't feel any pain and didn't know that anything had bitten me. Shark attacks were common, but I knew what to look for and my surfboard had a hole in the bottom to stop any from happening, even though I looked around and didn't see any. I turned around at that moment because I saw something big and green swimming about 15 feet away from me. From this side, where the water was clean, I saw that its back had scales, big spikes, and what looked like teeth. Was this an alligator? I thought we didn't have saltwater crocodiles down here. It was really strange. This thing did a full circle and stuck its face out of the water, so it wasn't facing me. That's when my stomach dropped when I saw a large creature with the face of a dinosaur from long ago. It had eyes the size of small footballs, thick, scaly green skin, and a jagged green horn that reached about a foot above its forehead. I had never seen such a thing before, but I knew right away that it was what had hurt my foot. I was able to swim slowly back to the shore, where I stood in the sand and watched the creature as my wounds still bled on the sand. So I limped back to my hut, bandaged my foot, and tried to use my binoculars to see if the creature was still there and if there were any others nearby. I told my manager right away, and he decided to close that part of the beach for the day. He thought it was just a fish and that I might have been exaggerating what I saw, which is common when you're scared and your adrenaline is pumping. I knew what I saw, though. So, for medical reasons, I took 2 weeks off. Even though my foot got better and I felt better, my nerves were all messed up. No one, not even my girlfriend, close friends, or family, believed me or took me seriously. All of them thought it was too early and I was too tired. But listen, I know what I saw. It was something horrible, a creature I've never seen before and I'm not sure if anyone else has either. When I got back to the beach, it was back to normal and busier than ever. As I sat in my hut, I looked from left to right. It was strange to hear and see so much joy in a place that had been so scary just 2 weeks before. I was always very comfortable working in the sea because I loved to swim, but when I looked out into it, I felt sick and couldn't think of anything worse than having to go back in. Luckily, there were no situations in which I had to help anyone. I started to see that thing everywhere. If I saw someone swimming in a green t-shirt, my eyes would play tricks on me, and I would look up expecting to see chaos and death. I would get a sudden rush of fear, and even though it was crazy hot outside, I would break out in a cold sweat. I knew this wasn't a good way to live, so I went to see my doctor for help. I started taking medicine for anxiety and told the doctor what I saw, just like everyone else. He said that the vision was caused by stress and asked me if I was taking any drugs at the time. I was really scared at the time. On one of my days off, I stayed at home and ate bad food, toast, and Twinkies. Even making love to my girlfriend was impossible. And I'm a 28-year-old man with a beautiful girlfriend. Whatever this thing was, it had made me very nervous in a way I'd never felt before. I even tried to listen to some soothing music, like SMR, but every time I closed my eyes, the cold, monster-like eyes of the beast would send a jolt of fear down my spine and make me flail my arms as if I were trying to swim away from the horror. I even secretly wanted the creature to come back and hurt someone else, so I would know I hadn't gone completely crazy. As I sat there alone in my apartment, my manager called me on the phone. He told me I had to come in because I wouldn't want to miss this and that he believed me. I remember sighing deeply, knowing that there would probably be another attack when I got there, but I didn't ask him for more information. I told him I'd get there as soon as possible. So, I got on my bike and pedaled like crazy. When I got there, my legs were numb and felt like jelly because I pushed so hard that I didn't even bother to fasten or secure my bike. I remember that I just put it down and ran to the office, where I thought I would see my boss and find out what had happened. I remember that when I got to the office, the receptionist pointed out to me where a large group of people had gathered around what looked like a washed-up animal on the beach. It was long and green, and I knew right away what it was. No one was on the beach. It was clear that the area had been cleared out, because police were walking around with clipboards and taking pictures. It looked like a crime scene right in front of me, like I was living on the set of CSI Miami. Neither kids laughing nor ice cream. Just the taste of fear in my mouth as I bit my lips so hard out of fear that they were almost going to bleed. My boss told me to go down the stairs, and I held on to my stomach, hoping I wouldn't throw up my breakfast. After the fact, my manager told me that the police had come in like a beast. The stomach of a sea creature that looked like a reptile was cut out. It was now dead, and at least 5 or 6 human bones were found in its stomach. Even though the remains were separated and in pieces, a forensic team on the scene was sure that it was more than one body. A marine biologist was also there. He took more pictures and used his portable computer. I remember him looking closely at the screen and saying that he didn't know what it was and had never seen anything like it. I asked my co-workers, but they didn't know what kind of animal it was. One of the officers told me that this would be an ongoing investigation and that a plan would have to be made to keep people from using this part of the beach. If word got out that this kind of creature often swims in the water, people would freak out. Luckily, I don't know of any real word getting out. So I didn't have to worry about it getting a lot of attention. Surprisingly, I haven't been able to find any pictures of it on Google, Pinterest, or anywhere else. But to me, the beast was real, and it attacked me. Luckily, it should be buried in the past, where it can't get to anyone and no one has to know it exists. As I write this, I can only thank the universe for keeping me safe. The fact that I only got a small cut shows how lucky I was. It was clear that this creature wanted to kill me and eat me. It was a bad ending for everyone. I thought about those sad people who had died in such horrible ways. Have they surfed like me or the adults who are almost like kids, or were these killings recent at the time? It happens often for surfers and swimmers to go missing or drown and not have their bodies found. I mean, bodies are usually found, but people do go missing even on the ocean. To think that my job, which I used to love and enjoy so much, was now a place where horrible things happened every day. Afterward, it felt like a bad dream. That part of the beach had been closed all year, but when COVID hit, it made things easier. But the real reason is that we're afraid of another attack until the forensics team has more information, which I never got. Why would I do that? I wasn't really that important to any investigation. There was also a group of scientists from all over the world who knew about creatures like this one. We need to be on the lookout for more reptiles like this in the ocean that are just waiting to come out and eat someone or something. No one knows what brought it out here to this beach. Its food chain might have been broken, or it might have changed its mind about what it wanted to eat. Even though it's been almost 14 years to the day, when I was out in the Sonoran Desert a long time ago, I saw something horrible. Was two close friends of mine going on an adventure. Before you think I'm a fake for wanting to explore the desert when it can get up to 120 degrees, let me explain. My friends and I felt pretty comfortable, so when we could, we would go out and explore for short periods of time. We've always been interested in the climate, the environment, the plants, and even the plains themselves when they were out in the desert. It makes you do something? Something that wants to know more about the world around it. I'm only a little bit native, and I'm not sure which tribe, but I have a small group of close friends who are all native. And it's always been our thing to go explore the nearby places we can, even if we can only do it for short bursts of time because it's so hot and dry. Before I tell you the rest of my story, I want you to know that I knew about things like skinwalkers and other supernatural beings that are said to live in the desert and hurt people. Well, I thought we'd be fine during the day and that we wouldn't be a threat or cause any supernatural beings to be on the lookout. I was wrong about that. And even though I don't think what we ran into was supernatural, I think it was something bad. My friends think it's not a natural creature, because it had a different kind of energy that I can't really explain. The Sonoran Desert is both beautiful and empty, but it is also home to a lot of beautiful plants and dangerous animals, like rattlesnakes and other dangerous animals. But what we saw that day was something I had never heard of before, even though some of my native friends say they have heard of it, and that their elders have talked about it and even warned them about it. Now that I know these creatures exist, I'll be much more careful when I explore the desert near where I live. In fact, because of this, I'm not sure I really want to go on any more desert adventures. What I saw that day is the only way I can describe it: huge desert snakes that are more than 3 times as long as us. I'm talking about something that's at least 20 feet long and big enough to swallow a manhole. These huge snakes were pale white with yellow and gold stripes. Whatever these creatures or snakes were, they seemed out of place. They were not like other animals in that they had a different energy around them. So I don't want you to hear this and think that it's just a snake. We came across this was very different, and as I said, it had an energy that made me feel like something bad was going to happen. It was a sign that we shouldn't have been there or that we had gone too far into a place we weren't supposed to be, which made the whole thing very interesting. Back then, nearly 14 years ago, my friends and I were not only going on an adventure, but we also had a goal in mind. Someone told one of my friends that there was a small graveyard not too far away. It sounded like it wasn't marked, but we were told that there was a magic barrier around it, and that we shouldn't go near it. My friends and I didn't believe in that hocus pocus, or if we did, it was on a very ritualistic level and we never would have thought that something like this would happen. I know what I'm saying probably sounds crazy and out of touch with reality, but I promise I have no intention of making it up. I have nothing to gain from it. My best guess is that whatever these things were, they had something to do with the graveyard we were near. Maybe these things were called to this place to protect it. I really don't know. We never really got answers because we were too scared to tell the people who told us not to go there what we had seen. So, we just kept it to ourselves, and even now, 14 years later, we still don't talk about it because our elders and family would shame and punish us if they found out. I remember that day being very hot, like every other day in the desert. So nothing out of the ordinary happened. But I can say that we weren't sure if the way we were going at the time was the right way. We were kind of guessing where it was based on the vague directions we had and the general area. Finally, after going over a small hill and almost falling into a dip in the valley, we found it. I'm sorry, but I'm not very good at describing land. But we got to this dip in a very small valley where we could almost feel the energy of a change. Not only did I notice it, but so did other people. Two of my friends, whose names I won't say, have also seen a change. We all looked at each other at the same time and said, "The air feels different." I can't even begin to explain how it felt, but it was almost like a change in the air or a feeling of electricity. But it's hard to say for sure. You could only know for sure if you went through it yourself. Not long after that, we started to feel the ground shaking. I'm not talking about a natural disaster. I mean that something big moved under the ground, and then a bunch of these things started to show up. We heard light rumblings coming from under our feet, and then two huge snakes came out of the sand. I've never seen anything so big before. The only thing I can think of that is similar is a game called Resident Evil 1, in which the main character fights a really big snake at one point. If you go to Google and search for it, you should be able to find it. I haven't played that game in a very long time. But based on what I could remember, I thought the snake or boss, whichever it was named Yawn. Just like a yawn you do when you wake up. Now, if you see a picture of this, it's clear that it's a made-up character from a game, but the size should give you a good idea of what it looks like. The snake in the game is so big that it must be made up because the snakes we saw were not as big. They were a lot smaller, but not so much smaller that they didn't fit. I'm trying to give you this game character because it's the only thing I can think of that at least comes close to the size you described. So now that you know that, keep it in mind. It was a pale white color with yellow markings on its sides, back, and front. It looked mean, almost like a viper with red and yellow eyes that glinted. Even though these snakes didn't always try to eat us when they came at us. I got the sense that they could have easily killed us if they had wanted to. They slithered around us and circled us as if to warn us. It was almost as if I had the feeling and vibe to leave and stop. They kept surrounding us and watching us, almost as if they were sizing us up before making their move. At some point, all three of us started to run out of there and back. The way we came, these huge snakes were still moving around, looking at us, sizing us up, and figuring out what they should do next. We didn't even try it. I don't know if their plan was to attack us, but they never did. They never got close to us or did anything else to make us think they were going to hurt us. Even though I think all of their feelings and energy were either stay where you are or go. Now, if I had thought that we should keep going even though they were there, they would have hit us, and that would have killed one of us. I can just picture a snake that size. We could have died because of that. I can't even guess how much poison they can make. Basically, that's all there is to my story, and I know I'm not a great storyteller and I'm not an author or writer. So this is all you'll get. But I'm sure you hear a lot of crazy stories, some of which are true and some of which aren't. I'm not here to spread lies. I'm here to tell you that there are things in the desert that we can't always see or know are there. And most of the time, if you're not allowed to go somewhere because of rumors or tradition, there's probably a good reason. And I don't think it's all just old wives' tales or superstitious nonsense. My friends and I didn't tell anyone in our towns about this, for sure. As I said at the beginning, I'm not from here, so I didn't have anyone to tell my story to, and no one believed me when I did. If I did. And, as I said, my two friends have kept it a secret to this day because if they had told their families or communities, they would have been punished, scolded, and reprimanded severely. I mean, we were just thrown out there as 16-year-olds looking for an adventure.